Hi everyone, welcome back to The Mystic in the Woods. I'm Kate, and today we're going to be rounding off our 3-part deity work series, talking about building communication and relationship with things like journeying, tarot, and what to do if you feel like you can't receive those messages. So in part 1 and 2, we really talked about the frameworks in the beginning, right? What deity work is, how to find your deity even if you feel like they're not reaching out to you, how to make that first connection, altars, offerings, kind of all that type of stuff, right? But today I want to take it one step further, and I really want to talk about kind of building that relationship and how to receive those messages from them. But as we step into this conversation, I think it's really important to kind of start with when we're doing this work and we're building this relationship and this communication, we're really stepping into the realm of the High Priestess in tarot, right? So if you think about the High Priestess card, there's always like pillars and symbols of like the veil and the mysteries, right? She initiates us all onto our next level of divine truth. She sits at the veil between this world and the next. She's the gatekeeper, asking us if we're really ready to kind of match the resonance of the temple so that we can receive information from our deities. The thing, though, is that the High Priestess in this situation is us. And often, in order for us to really receive those messages and kind of meet that frequency, we have to release things that are in the way. And very often, those are things like self-doubt or fear, whether those things be conscious or even unconscious. So we do that. I want to talk about first kind of like how we do that, and how if you're struggling to receive messages, there's a few things to think about. First of all, the comparison monster, right? Like when I think about how I communicate with deity and how that's different from somebody else, and if I let that impact me, right? So this person is seeing things play out like a movie in front of their eyes, and that person is hearing things, and this person does X, Y, Z, and it's not like that for me, and does that mean that I'm doing this wrong, or I'm not as good at this, or whatever? We kind of got to let that go, because it's going to be different for everybody. It's going to be different for everybody for a few different reasons. One of which is we all have kind of different skills here. So we can look at the clairs for like a framework, but don't let those box you in. Some people are going to see things better. Some people are going to hear things more. Some people are just going to know, or they're going to get feelings. So it's going to look different for everybody. Second is that it looks different for everybody because we're all at different stages. And for a lot of us, I would argue even most of us, receiving clear messages takes practice. We talk about intuition being like a muscle because it needs to be worked out. It needs practice and strength training in order to become, as solid at this as we want it to be. It takes time and practice. It can also look different for everybody because we do receive information differently. So some people might see their deity step forward, while as other people see symbols or colors inside a meditation. So it can also look different on everybody, because if we go back to that muscle metaphor, and I've talked about this before, I think I have a whole video on healing your intuition or something like that. And I really talk about there how it's not, if we're talking about a muscle, it's not always just enough to do strength training. Sometimes that muscle has an injury, and that injury needs to be repaired first. So this is where we can look at something like a witch wound, and a witch wound can really put blocks in that channel, making it hard for us to hear or see or know or to receive messages in any way, whether we're talking about doing that in journey work, in tarot, or in some other modality. And that is because the witch wound runs very deep in most women, because for a very long time, we can argue thousands of years, the feminine has been systematically demonized, and it has literally been unsafe for women for a very long time to step into our power, to use our voice, to have any kind of magical practice, to have a connection with the divine. The witch trials in the United States were a very short period of time, but they went on for a very long time in Europe. And all of us have, either past life trauma, epigenetic or ancestral trauma that our bodies remember. We have societal or religious conditioning that is telling us it's not safe. We have to convince our nervous systems and our bodies that it's safe. So we often need to do some healing around a witch wound in order to be able to really connect with our deities and our guides as much as we'd like to, or as deeply or as clearly as we'd like to. Because even on an unconscious level, we believe it's not safe, our unconscious will block those messages from coming in. So very often we need to do something like heal a witch wound. And when we do that, it can look like going back into past lives and healing that. It can look like understanding epigenetic and ancestral trauma and how that is passed down in our genes. It can look like deconditioning religious programming and societal conditioning. And it can also look like somatics, nervous system work, and embodiment practices, because if you've been around my channel before, you've heard me talk about this, but there's that quote that says, we can only ascend as high as our roots are deep. We can only reach for the divine as securely as we are embodied, as deeply as we are embodied, as deeply as we've dove into our shadow and reached for the underworld. We can't have a tree that grows really tall without a solid root system, because it's just gonna fall over. So very often for a lot of us, healing the witch wound requires all of these things. Now, this is something that, I help people do. All the people that I've had come onto the channel so far, there's interviews with Kristen Ramazana, there's an interview with Racine. We all, in various ways, help people heal the witch wound, help people with shadow work, help people heal feminine wounding, and connect with our deities. So having somebody help you can be really, beneficial here for some people. Speaking of which, my, of course, 3-hour masterclass, Shadow Work with Deity, is going to be happening on January 28th. We're going to do all of this stuff inside of that masterclass. It's only $22, so if this is something you would like a taste of, this is a perfect workshop for that. We're going to meet your deity, we're going to do shadow work, we're going to find out if you have a witch wound, we're going to do card work, we're kind of going to do all the things we're talking about inside of this video. So all the information for that is below. And of course, I do one-on-one work, I have group containers, all the things. So all that information is below, and that's something to keep in mind if you would like help, if that feels like in alignment for you. But remember that, so again, try not to compare. Everybody's experience is different. It takes practice, just like any other skill. And sometimes we have a witch wound that needs to be healed before we can really take this practice as deep as we would like. Now, regardless of whether we're talking about journeying, tarot, or something else, and we're going to talk about all that here in a second. Again, there are numerous ways that you may receive information. And I want to talk about that for just a second, because even within those numerous ways to receive information, there can be variation. So one person might see a scene play out in their mind like a movie. Another person might just see symbols or colors or patterns or something like that. How we hear things might be different. If you're somebody who's going to hear things, if you're going to hear messages, I'm somebody who often hears messages, but it doesn't come from like a third voice. It comes from my own voice, but it's just a little bit detached. You might just know things. You might feel things in your body. These are all going to be different for everybody, and it can take some time, and again, practice, to be able to tease apart what is coming from your deity and what is coming from your human mind. Meditation practices are really helpful for this. So you can learn to clear your mind, still your body, and hear. I'm going to use the term hear, but really just receive messages in any way. One tip on this is that I received when I first started down this path is that your intuition or your guides are those first 7 seconds after you ask a question. So if you ask a question inside of meditation or to your tarot deck or throughout the day, what comes up in those first 7 seconds is your intuition or your guides talking to you. And what comes up after that is very often your human mind trying to make sense of things. I don't know that this is like a hard and fast rule for everybody, but I have found it to be very helpful to take a deep breath, ask my question, and then just receive the answer in those first 7 seconds and not overthink it. So we may attempt to receive these answers in journey. So you're going to hear people talk about journey work a little bit differently. Some people are going to say shamanic journey, meditating with deities. You're going to hear spirit flight or hedge crossing. There are certainly these are slightly different practices, but you're going to hear this all talked about this way. But what we're doing in any of these things is we're going into a really deep meditative state where our brain is actually going into theta brainwaves, and we are going to meet the deity on their plane or inside of our inner temple. And this is where we can interact with them directly. We can get answers. They can show us past lives or current life memories or all the things. So for a lot of people, this journey work is really kind of the core piece of their deity work practice and the most profound piece of their deity work practice. It can be really challenging for people. So if this is challenging for you to sit down and drop into this meditative state to speak to your deities, first of all, again, know it takes practice. Secondly, do not discount guided meditations and journeys to get you started on this. YouTube is full of them. If you're on my email list, then I'm trying to start a quarterly newsletter that I think meditations are going to be a part of. Again, you can work with a coach. There's lots of ways to have somebody else guide you through this practice. And that can be a really good way to bridge that gap where you're learning to do this and you're teaching your mind and your body how to drop into this meditative state. I'm also going to have a video coming out like psychology hacks for your spiritual practice soon, because we do live in a human body and our human body is how we receive messages. So there are ways we can use our psychology and our biology and all the things to our advantage. Now, what I want to mention here is just building associations. So if you burn the same incense or the same oil or you listen to the same music every time that you go to meditate or to journey with your deities, it's going to create an association in your mind that helps you drop into that state faster and faster. And this does get easier with practice, but I will say that for me in the beginning, guided journeys was the most impactful piece for me learning how to do this on my own and kind of training my brain how to do it. So let's also talk about tarot. So you can really substitute any divination practice here, but I'm going to talk about tarot and oracle specifically. So tarot and oracle can also be a really great way to keep building that relationship with your deity, especially if or while journey work is really hard for you. Because again, it's a skill that we have to learn. Now, when I'm going to use tarot or oracle to communicate with the deity, the first thing is that I'm going to set a really clear intention. Okay, so I'm going to, say my invocation like I normally say, and then I'm going to very specifically invite in whichever deity I'm trying to communicate with. And then I'm going to start to ask my questions. Now, the questions that you ask are going to have to do with whatever you're working with that deity on, or whatever you're moving through in your life, or whatever you'd like guidance on. You can certainly just ask for a general message for the day. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about is just communicating with your deity throughout the day. And while this is in some ways the simplest, some people find it to be the hardest, and it is often far more profound than you'd think, especially over time. So to do this, you can really just ask your deity questions throughout the day. If you're stuck on something, if you need advice on something, you can set the intention to go for a walk and watch for symbols from them. To say, literally just set the intention on this walk. I'm going out on this walk to connect with Asherah, and I'd like to see any, symbols or messages you have for me. And I'm going to try to be intentional and present on that walk. You can sit in front of your altar with no agenda. I tend to do this a lot because as much as I love a full moon ceremony or ritual, I also have a 2-year-old who doesn't sleep a lot of nights. So it can be really exhausting for me to sit down and do a full ceremony. So very often I will light a candle, make an offering, and then I will just sit there with a cup of hot chocolate or a glass of wine and just sit there, invite them in and just sit in their presence and see what comes through with absolutely no agenda. And that can be really impactful. So again, take into consideration that 7-second rule throughout your day. So ask your deity a question, see what comes to the surface in the first 7 seconds. If that feels helpful for you, if it doesn't feel helpful for you, throw it out. But the more that you do this, the more you're going to find how your deity communicates with you, what symbols or signs they send you throughout the day, whether you're hearing or knowing or feeling something. Plus, I think that generally those of us who have the most impactful deity work practice really do treat it like a relationship where we are communicating regularly about all kinds of stuff, and not always just because we want help with something. It can be about anything. Sometimes people will drop into meditation just to chat, just to be like, hey, what's going on? Wanted to come see you. And just keep it really chill. And that can be really, really helpful when you're building this deity work practice. I do want to just take a quick moment to mention that ancestral relationships and past life relationships can actually absolutely, that's the word I'm looking for, can absolutely impact your current relationship. So a lot of times we find that when different deities come forward to connect with clients, that there's a past life relationship there, and it will automatically feel very close and very firm, very solid. And that's because you've already worked with this deity before. You've already built that relationship. The channel is there. You just had to open the door. All you had to do was open the door and clear out the witch wound, and that channel was there. So I, for example, work with Mother Mary a lot, not so much actively, as she's just sort of like a patron saint of my family. So I kind of inherited her. She's an important like ancestral deity for me. And then I have a lot of different deities and goetic infernals and things that I find I just have really solid past life relationships with. And so while I do actively work to maintain those relationships, it's not the same as building a new one. And so if you find that once you do finally connect with a deity and start to clear out that channel, that the relationship feels established, that's okay. That's great. And you may clear out the channel, connect with the deity, and find out it's new and you're building a new relationship, and that's beautiful too. So take what comes, trust what comes, and again, don't compare, let go of the self-doubt, and play with all these different things. Journeying, whether that be a guided one or one you do on your own, tarot, working with them throughout the day. Just experiment. Take the pressure off, just like if you're building a new friendship or a new relationship of some kind. And again, if you want help with this, I help people with this in my one-on-one packages. In Reclaiming Eve, we're going to be doing a lot of this and hitting the witch wound pretty hard, which is a 3-month intensive shadow work program starting in February. And then, of course, I have the 3-hour masterclass on January 28th. If this is past that date when you're watching this, I may turn it into a self-study resource, so check the link below if you're interested in that anyway. And let me know if you have any questions, if there's anything you'd like me to expand on, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.